Do wills, if you got a will and no trust, are you gonna go through probate?
Absolutely. That is exactly what will happen.
What, yeah, like he said, we got the wills and our lawyer told us, you don't need a trust. And we thought, oh good, everything is cut and dry, everything will be okay, and now we are hearing you need to have a trust, or things are gonna go into probate.
Well, they will go into probate. So
But,
when I started practicing law, which I hate to say how long ago that was, there were very few people, very few lawyers who did trusts. And the reason was, quite honestly, lawyers made a lot of money putting estates through probate. You got a statutory fee, you got to charge actually extra. So lawyers were very much opposed to trusts. That's changed. Now lawyers have figured out they owe a duty to their client. The duty to the client should be to avoid the costs of probate. So although for very, very large estates, there may be a benefit in having some part go through probate to take advantage of the extra tax-paying entity, but it's a very small number of people. Avoiding probate, I mean, it just saves you time. It saves you time, it saves you money, particularly if your estate is below the estate tax threshold, or you don't have an estate tax return, transition's immediate, or relatively immediate. So, yeah, something you ought to think about. Yes?
So if somebody already has today a joint revocable, living trust or whatever it would be called for husband and wife, would they, if they wanted to enact something of this nature, get that existing trust amended? Or would they have to create a new trust?
No, we've been amending, what we've done is we've amended the trust that we've done just to make it clear that we're intending to be covered by it. Technically, probably don't need to do that. But we have been doing it, because usually there's other changes that you want to make. It just brings it into sort of conformity. Yeah.
Mark, would this affect at all any of the bypass provisions in a typical family trust prior to when the statute was enacted?
It has the whole idea of the qualified spousal trust is really to allow you to have the bypass situation.
Such as qualified assets passing through the trust, the look-through provisions. Pardon me, not bypass, but the look-through provisions for qualified assets.
A look through, you mean for like retirement assets?
Correct.
You build that into, the retirement assets are not going to be tenancy by the entirety.
Correct. But it wouldn't affect that.
But it doesn't affect it. You build into the trust the ability to take in those assets and then have the look-through capability. It's built into the form of the trust. At least the ones we do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're not having impact there. So you can actually add non-tenancy by the entirety assets. You just won't get the asset protection to it. So one of the negatives of the statute, which we've actually been trying to pass, I thought we were going to get it passed this last session, didn't succeed, is you have to transfer tenancy by the entirety assets in to get the asset protection. So that means if you've got separate property, you're earning a salary. You have to take that, transfer it into a joint account, and then transfer it into the joint trust. It would be nicer if you could just transfer it directly into the qualified spousal trust. But right now you can't do that. If you do it, if you transfer that, deposit that salary directly into the trust, perfectly governed by the trust, it won't be protected. That asset will not be protected in the same way that tenancy by the entirety would be. So there's a
Would it still be the same that an IRA would have to be transferred to the trust on your death, an IRA?
Well, an IRA doesn't have to be transferred to a trust. An IRA can go directly to the spouse, or it can go into the trust. You can have a trust that has look-through provisions, as we talked about here. it depends on what the goal is with the IRA. And, there is some flexibility of if you give it to a spouse, and there's some downsides. Because if you give it to a spouse and the spouse remarries or decides that they don't want the property to go the way you wanted it to go, it's going to go the way your spouse wants it to. So that's the reason for putting it into a trust and having a trust that has the look-through provisions to it. But it's not a requirement of an IRA that it be paid to a trust. It's just an option. Did that answer your question? Anything else?
What is the cost to do this under a normal?
Normally, it's about $4,500 to do it. And then there can be some additional costs of transferring assets. Some clients like to transfer the assets themselves. I know we've used Four Seasons. They'll transfer the assets most of the assets, without any charge. So that's the advantage of using them. They have lots of advantages of using them, but that's one of them. But there are titles to houses and real estate. Usually that's better done if a lawyer does it than somebody else does it. Yeah.
So that's the cost of amending a revocable trust, or that's one brand new?
That's a new one. Amending one would be significantly less, assuming that it qualified, and assuming you didn't have other changes.
What's significantly less?
I'd have to see the trust to give you an answer to that. Probably we've done them probably for $1,000, $1,500 bucks. Yes.
Mark, as financial planners, we're always asked about these documents and whether someone should seek an attorney or go to a place like LegalZoom, which, as you know, is a much different cost structure. Could you speak a little bit to the dangers of going to a do-it-yourself website?
Well, yeah, how do I say that? Sometimes you really do get what you pay for. And a lawyer is going to be much better able to assure that you get your desires accomplished than LegalZoom is going to be able to. I mean, my goal when I do an estate plan is not to put my ideas to you. I want to make sure that your plan is the one that gets implemented. That takes a little more time and effort, but it assures that you get what you really wanted. Now, I'll try to guide you and say, well, here's some ideas that you need to think about. But part of my job is to really sit down and work through with you, what are your goals, what are your needs, what are you trying to accomplish, and then make sure your documentation works accordingly. You won't get that with LegalZoom.
Is it necessary, if you've read this, to have a trust company run the trust?
No, it's not. It's not. You can be your own trustee. The selection of trustees is always an important decision. There's a lot of considerations. Trust companies have a function. They have a good function. They're good at administrating, doing the paperwork. They've got a long history of how to operate trusts. But most people don't like trust companies because they're
Most people
trustees.
want their money.
Yeah. So family members, anybody can be the trustee. I mean, typically in the typical qualified spousal trust, it's the spouses are the trustees. And when the spouses can't act, then whoever, whether it be a family member, a child, or whoever they want, then that's who goes in.
So it's not necessary to have a lawyer or
It is not necessary to have a, right,
a trust company to do it.
not at all. Not at all. And that's true of any trust, not just the qualified spousal trust. Yes?
Is the QST required to file tax returns?
No, actually it's not. Not until the first person dies. Because once the first person dies, that trust, if it's a separate share trust, becomes an irrevocable trust. If it's a joint trust, then it continues on as a non-taxpaying entity. Now, that's a good question because actually when you set up the separate share trust, you're going to use the husband's social security number for his share and the wife's social security number for her share. You're going to actually have two, they're going to look and feel like two separate trusts in the separate share version. And they're not separate taxpaying entities. Other questions? Again, I appreciate the time, appreciate the opportunity to give you a little information about qualified spousal trust.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
You know, it really takes a lot of time and effort, and Mark's valuable time to present tonight. So, Four Seasons Wealth Management, we're always looking for really good presenters, and certainly Mark is one of them. You know, in the beginning I mentioned that we have an evaluation forum, so I'd ask you at this time to just